Welcome to Hack the Entrepreneur, the show which reveals the fears, habits, and inner battles behind big-name entrepreneurs and those on their way to joining them. Now here is your host, John Naster.
Hey, this is Hack the Entrepreneur. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I am your host, John Naster, but you can call me Johnny. My guest today has been bootstrapping startups since 2014. He is currently the co-founder and CEO of Snappa, software built to enable entrepreneurs and marketers to create graphics. Snappa was launched in July of 2015 and just recently passed the impressive milestone of $25,000 monthly recurring revenue. From quitting his once stable government job to recently purchasing the URL snappa.com for $40,000, this conversation is really insightful. It's insightful into the inner workings of building and growing a software company from the ground up. Now, let's hack. Christopher Gimmer. I want to introduce you to StudioPress Sites, the answer to all of your website needs. StudioPress Sites is a proven solution that gives you the ease of an all-in-one website builder with the flexible power of WordPress. It's perfect for bloggers, podcasters, and affiliate marketers, as well as those selling physical products, digital downloads, and membership programs. Here's what you get when you sign up to StudioPress Sites. First, you start off with the flexible power of WordPress, built on top of fast, secure hosting. Plus, you're going to get 20 mobile-optimized HTML5 designs included. Then the trusted plugins and easy setup and testing, including their one-click install of all included plugins. Zero hosting hassles. Sign up and be set up in minutes without the hassle of installing WordPress, buying a theme, or sorting out the best plugins. Plus, included security and maintenance features that keep your site safe. It's designed to be easy and hassle-free, and yet you can rest assured that if something does go off the rails, the friendly StudioPress support team is standing by 24/7 to assist you in getting back on track. If you're ready to see for yourself why over 200,000 website owners trust StudioPress, the industry standard for premium WordPress themes and plugins, then just go to studiopress.com/hack. Check out all the innovative features today at StudioPress, and as a Hack the Entrepreneur listener, you'll get your very first month absolutely free. Go right now and check it out at studiopress.com/hack. We are back with another episode of Hack the Entrepreneur. And today we have a very special guest. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure. It's nice to have a fellow Canadian and Ontarian on the show.
That's right.
So, what do you say? Should we jump into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Christopher, as an entrepreneur, can you tell me what is the one thing that you do that you feel has been the biggest contributor to your successes so far?
For me, I would have to say that I've kind of developed this motto of daily progress. And that's really helped me because I think when I first started out as an entrepreneur, I was always looking at the end game and the end goal. And, when you get caught up in that, sometimes you get discouraged and it could be kind of difficult not to be where you want to be. So basically every day I always have at least one thing on my to-do list that will help me make progress in my business and will help me move the needle. And I've noticed that as long as you do that at least, every single day, you look back 6 months and think, holy crap, we've done a lot and we've come a long way. So that's kind of been my thing, is just every day work on at least one thing that's going to move the needle in the business.
I like it. Did you realize that there really sort of isn't like an end game? Or
yeah, I mean, that's
like, where is it, right? It's always going to grow. So
yeah, I mean, when we were just talking briefly before we started recording, like I was mentioning that, at one point I was just hoping to get to like 10K MRR, and that was going to be great. And I'd be able to support myself and yada, yada. And then all of a sudden you hit 10K and it's like, oh crap, okay, well now we need to hire someone because we have all these customers, and then you hit the next milestone. And like you said, there's basically never an end game. And so yeah, that my thing was kind of like, okay, well, instead of it's good to set like goals in terms of, we want to hit, X revenue, or we want to have X amount of customers, but at some point you're going to hit that goal, and then you're going to have to set a new one. So like I said, I've kind of just developed this new motto of like, every day just work on something that is going to help you make progress, and the rest will kind of take care of itself.
Yeah, and I really like this. So this idea of working on sort of one thing every day to see the progress over 6 months, how do you sort of decide what that, like, are you working in sort of like month-long plans, quarterly, 6 months, and then sort of break that down into days, or how does this process work for you?
Yeah, so I mean, like as a company, we have goals. We have typically like a yearly goal and then kind of like quarterly goals. And so I essentially use like Trello to organize myself. So I always have like a backlog of tasks, and some of those are inbound. So for example, we might get a support request that comes in, and I'll read that, I'll be like, oh, we should probably create, a knowledge base article, because, other people might have the same concern, and they might get confused in the app and then kind of leave us. So there's kinds of stuff like that. And then there's the other thing where obviously I'm heavily involved in the marketing. So I'm always kind of trying to come up with strategies and different initiatives that will help us grow. So that whether that will be like a new marketing channel to try out, or optimizing an existing channel. So I always make sure that I have a backlog of those kinds of things on my Trello that I want to try at some point.
I like
So
it.
basically, sorry, so to kind of finish off, basically at the end of each day, I kind of look at, all the stuff that I have on there, and I will basically plan out three things that I have to get done, or I want to get done for the next day. And one of those things will always be one of those, what I like to call like a task that will move the needle in our business.
Nice. And so you're setting yearly goals to start it as a company. So you and your co-founder,
Yeah.
how sort of lofty of those goals? Like, do you set sort of very, very reachable goals, or you kind of shoot for the stars?
I would say that it's like maybe a little above reachable. Yeah, I mean, there's so many schools of thought, right? But I feel like if you set goals that are just so out there that like you're never going to hit them, I kind of don't see the value in that. So, for example, like when we set our goals in terms of the MRR that we want to hit at the end of the year, I'll actually go in and say, okay, if we want to achieve this goal, what is that going to mean in terms of increase in signups, increase in average price, lower churn. And I'll actually, develop at least some rough plan where, okay, well, if we, bump up our content marketing, then maybe we can increase signups by X%. If we, figure out this marketing channel, we can, increase our signups by X%. So I like to make goals that are achievable, but, we like to push ourselves a little bit.
Nice, nice. That's a good thing to do. So Snappa is the company you're running now, but you had a company before this. And so this seems to be like this really seems to be catching on, this whole side hustle and like starting a business while like having a job, and sort of hoping or pushing the business to grow to the point where it can replace your job. This has happened to you. So could you take us back, Christopher, sort of to what sort of made you think to even start a business on the side? And then how long did it take you to be able to exit your job?
Yeah, so I was working in the government as a financial analyst. My background's like finance and accounting. And like a lot of people in my position, I kind of got to that point where I was just a little bored with the day job and wasn't too thrilled about the prospect of being a salaried employee for the rest of my life. And one of the things that really changed things was I started, traveling a bit more, and I had traveled to Southeast Asia, and it was just such a phenomenal trip. And at the time I only had like 3 weeks vacation, so I basically had to wait an entire year before I can go on my next trip. So what ended up happening was at my job I had met Mark, who's now my co-founder at Snappa, and he was a developer, and well, he wasn't really a developer. He was a programmer on the side, but he didn't do development in as a professional career. And so when I saw what he was able to create, I was just blown away. And like, he was a young guy and he can code up, these websites, no problem. And that's when I got really inspired. Like, wow, if we teamed up and he did all the tech stuff and I handled, the business and marketing, maybe we can actually create a business together. And that's kind of where we started off on this long journey to where we are today, where we kind of had two failed businesses, one that, helped us make enough money to quit our jobs, and now finally Snappa, where I feel like we've learned enough and grown enough to actually be able to create something of great value.
So you're the same co-founders for both companies.
Yep, yeah. So
Oh,
we
very
we
cool.
we've been we've been hacking away at stuff for quite a long time, and that's kind of a testament. Like, we've become really good friends. I was a groomsman at his wedding, and so we've kind of been there through all the ups and downs. And I think that's really important for a co-founder relationship.
Did you meet any like digital nomads or anything in Southeast Asia that really sort of piqued your interest about it?
Well, the first time I traveled to Southeast Asia, like at that point, I hadn't even really known anything about the whole online world. It wasn't until after I came back where I really, started thinking about, starting my own business. And then eventually, you just start you stumble upon one podcast and then you stumble upon a blog. And then next thing you know, that's when I kind of started learning about this whole like online entrepreneurship stuff. So, but the first time I went to Southeast Asia, like, I didn't know any nomads. I didn't even know about the whole online world. But I've been back since, and now I have quite a few nomad friends.
Nice. I like it. So you you were in finance, but you felt that you had sort of marketing sort of chops behind you that you could, when you met like a developer, you're like, now I just need to think of something that he can build that I can sell.
Well, sort of. I thought I had business jobs,
All right,
but
fair enough.
I learned really quickly that I didn't. So essentially, what happened was that the first thing that we started was a student dating website called Classmate Catch, and so we whipped that up, and then we ended up getting about 1,000 users in Ottawa, our local city, and we did that mainly through, we got some PR. Journalists love the whole homegrown story angle, so we kind of milk that. You just like really old school stuff like flyering and putting up posters and stuff. Then what happened was, when we were trying to scale outside of Ottawa to like Toronto and Montreal and other cities, it just wasn't happening. And the reason why is that I do nothing about online marketing. And then so once we kind of, hit that failure point in that business, that's when I really went on this journey of learning like absolutely everything I could about online marketing, and, subscribed to tons of blogs, started listening to a lot of podcasts. And that's where I started learning about, SEO, content marketing, and all that stuff. And that's, what we applied to our next business, which was Bootstrap Bay. So when we started that, I was definitely much more equipped to actually do proper marketing once we had our product built.
So you're not afraid to kind of learn it as you go. It's just
Oh, I mean, yeah, like I don't even remember what we learned in marketing when I went to school. I mean, probably something that has like zero application to today. And even a lot of the marketing students that, I talk to now, they're still kind of learning really, I would call it old school marketing. And so like as an entrepreneur, you really have to be willing to learn everything, really. I mean, there's tons of stuff that I've had to force myself to learn.
and when Bootstrap Bay started to make enough money that you decided you could quit your job, how were like what was the reaction of the people around you, family, friends? Because I mean, you go to university, you're in Ottawa, for those who aren't Canadian and don't know, it's like the nation's capital. So it's a massive city for government employment, obviously. And to a lot of people, that's like the end all be all. That's what you're sort of seeking out. You had that. And then here you are. It's like, I built something on the internet and now I'm going to quit this. What did everybody around you say?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, from the outside looking in, I had quote unquote made it, I guess. Well, at least for Ottawa standards, which was like, close to six-figure income, house, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, obviously my parents were a little concerned. The one thing that was really great for me was that I was able to take 1 year off, and if I chose, I could still have my old job back. So as much as I had like zero plans to go back, that's kind of how I convinced my parents not to like freak out too much. I just said, oh, well, if it doesn't work out, I can just go back to my job, not a big deal. And then, in terms of friends, is, like my good friends obviously were like super supportive, but I find for people who are just not exposed to the whole, entrepreneurship thing, and they don't quite get like like how do you make money online? Like, I'm sure a lot of people thought I was crazy, but at the end of the day, you got to do what's important to you and what makes you happy. So yeah, that's kind of how I approached it.
I like it. So you got yourself 1 year to be able to come back if you wanted that, put everyone at ease, and then you had to just work your ass off for a year to make sure that it was really stable by the end so that everyone would be happy.
Yeah, the only thing that was kind of scary was I had started my CMA designate, my accounting designation. And so I had done 2 out of the 3 years. And I basically had an agreement with my employer where they would pay for it as long as, I stayed with them for 2 years after. So the the added risk I had was like I'd essentially was throwing away $10,000 because if I didn't come back, I would have obviously I had to repay that money. So for me, there was like extra pressure. We're like, all right, I really got to make this work. Otherwise, like, I'm on the hook for a good amount of money if I don't come back. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously risk involved, but like I tried to minimize as much risk as I could, and I tried to, make sure that the business had enough legs under it before, we really took that final leap of faith and quit for good.
Right. So it wasn't totally erratic and irrational. It was sort of methodical, but there's also an unknown, but there's an unknown just in general in life. That's how it works. So
Yeah,
fair enough.
yeah, totally. Yeah.
So this leads us now to Snappa. I believe is it about 2 years later or a year and a half, sort of after leaving your job now?
Yeah, that's about right.
So now you have Snappa, which you started around, I believe, July 2015, was it?
Yeah, that's
So
correct.
you're at
Yeah, that's when we July 2015 is where we basically launched the absolute initial beta, and then we kind of officially launched the software November of 2015, so a few months after that.
very cool. And so right before that, like probably a few months, whatever, of development time, but where did the idea come from to start Snappa as what it stands or what it stood as when you launched?
Yeah, so when we were working on Bootstrap A, which was basically a marketplace for Bootstrap templates, the way we grew that business was primarily through content marketing and SEO. So I was writing a lot of blog articles, and that's how we got traffic. Every time that I created these articles, the images looked like crap. And that's when I was like, man, I wish there was, I mean, I'm not good in Photoshop. Mark, who's got some design skills, was just, too busy actually working on the site. I wish there was a better way to, for someone like me to be able to create these images without having to like hire a graphic designer. And when I kind of looked at what was available at the time, I found that the products were either too complex, like they either offered a lot of functionality, but were just like too slow and complicated to use, or it was on the other end of the spectrum where it was essentially like a quote generator, where it was just too, it was easy to use, but like you couldn't really do much other than slap text on a background image. So that's kind of when I had like the first, I guess, itch to, create something like that. The issue was at the time, like we just, to support a software product, where you're charging $10 a month, you need a lot of customers. And at the time, like I didn't really know how that was going to happen. So what ended up happening a little while later was I wrote a blog post on Bootstrap Bay where to find free stock photos. And this is when, a lot of these like newer sites started popping up where photos were being released under Creative Commons. So when I released that blog post, it ended up going viral. And so we were getting tons of traffic to this blog post of where to get free stock photos. I kind of looked at that and said, wow, there's clearly a ton of demand for these kind of photos. And what we realized was a lot of the sites that we're linking to didn't have any search functionality, and it was kind of cumbersome to really find the type of photo that you're looking for. So what we did was we created our own site called StockSnap, where we essentially initially started, curating some of these photos tagging them appropriately so that they could be searched. And then so when we launched that stock photo website, that started getting a ton of traction. So then we kind of got to this point where we're like, wow, we have a lot of traffic coming to this blog post of where to get free stock photos. And we're also generating a lot of traffic for our own free stock photo site. So we kind of had, this inkling that, a lot of the people who were coming to our stock photo site would potentially be interested in Snappa. And, we would be able, or we'd essentially have an audience to launch the product to. So over the next few months, I started doing, some surveys and Skype interviews to kind of validate my hypothesis that this type of product would be valuable to these people. And sure enough, I kind of, came to that conclusion. And that's when we started, working on Snappa because we saw a big opportunity there.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah. So
Stocksnap.io is the site.
that's
made
the
by
site.
Snappa.
Yeah.
It says right on it. So you stumbled across sort of this stock photo, just like from the blog post, like the virality of it and the need for it. And so once you created that site, then there was traffic there. There was an audience waiting for a product behind it.
Yeah, exactly. And, going back to kind of my motto of like daily progress, when I look at Snappa, the only reason we were able to start it is because of all these things that have happened leading up to it. And they only happen because we're just continuously creating and continuously hustling, right? And that's basically what happened. We just kept building momentum. We kept building on top of the other thing. And I think that's an important lesson too. It's a lot easier to build off of what you already have as opposed to completely starting something brand new from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. And so is StockSnap still like your main sort of customer acquisition channel for Snappa?
It's definitely still a big one. Can't remember the exact numbers, but I mean, for the first, like, I would say 6 months, I mean, it was definitely like a huge percentage of the signups that we were getting were coming from that site. And then eventually, we started getting a lot more word of mouth, a lot more referrals from other websites, SEO and our content marketing efforts started reaping rewards. But I mean, StockSnap is still definitely a huge driver of the acquisition to Snappa. So it's a really good growth engine.
So you decided sort of early on to diversify. And so to create a content plan for Snappa itself, you didn't just go all in and keep pushing like StockSnap so that it could drive Snappa.
Yeah, so the thought process at the time was like, okay, clearly there's, a huge demand for these kind of new style of stock photos, which are like not cheesy and released under Creative Commons. And we always had the goal of, okay, well, if we build this site and it generates a lot of traffic, we could definitely use that to promote Snappa. And we thought, as a worst case scenario, having a stock photo site that generates a lot of traffic could be used for something valuable. So luckily, it ended up working out that it does send us a lot of good traffic for Snappa. So today we use it just primarily as a lead generation for Snappa.
Yeah, and I like the idea because there's definitely competition for Snappa. Like there's other players. There's Canva, which got, I think, a ton of money to go out and they had what Guy Kawasaki was like their spokesman when he was on my show 2 years ago or something. And so there was definitely competition in the market. But to you, does competition show that it's a valid market, or does it sort of make you want to push away from entering that market at all?
That's a really good question. I think as long as the market is big enough, which for this I think it is a big market, I think there's always room to at the end of the day, there's no way that one product can serve every type of customer really well. So like you said, Canva's raised a ton of money. I think they're over $30 million or something like that. They built a really good product. But when you raise $30 million, you have to provide value to a lot or a wide range of people. So they're kind of Canva's, I guess, philosophy is that they're trying to empower the world to be designers. We're actually not doing that. Our customers tend to be busy entrepreneurs and marketers who want to create really nice graphics that lead to high engagement, but they're not trying to be designers. They don't want to spend a lot of time creating these graphics, and they have a certain type of graphic that they want to create. So I think like in terms of competition, as long as you're differentiating and you offer something of value that your competitor doesn't, there's always going to be room for more than one competitor.
Yeah, exactly. And your product is definitely different. It seemed, when I was first introduced to it, it seemed like on the surface sort of the same, but using both of them actively, it's really different. And I guess it's nuanced, but it is, I think you're right that your product is more geared towards somebody like me rather than somebody who's trying to be a graphic designer but isn't. So have you thought now, since the growth, you've hit your 25,000 monthly recurring revenue, which is an awesome milestone, and I congratulate you on that. Has there been any talk within the company of a new sort of pricing structure? Because you're right, $10 a month is hard. I mean, you've nailed it up to this point, but right now you have a free sort of starter package, and then there's the $10 a month, and that's it. Have you thought of tiering it out any further?
Yeah, so we're actually just started working on our team plan. So one thing that we realized pretty quickly on is that we have a lot of, small businesses who are using Snappa. And the issue right now is they're either kind of like sharing an account, or, they want to be able to have more than one person creating graphics for the team, and to be able to collaborate on the different graphics. So we're going to be releasing a team plan hopefully pretty soon, where you'll actually be able to have, more than one user per account, and basically be able to kind of collaborate on the graphics together. And obviously that will come at a more expensive price point. So that's kind of the next step in terms of the pricing.
So is the new pricing, I'm trying to see what was led. Like, was it led by you as a team being like, okay, we need to sort of add another tier of pricing, or was it literally driven by the customers telling you over and over again that they need it?
It was both things, because and early on, it's funny because when we first started, and $10 a month, we're growing, super well. And then at a certain point you realize like churn is a real thing. And if you with a low price point, at a certain point you just need to like keep piling on a ton of customers. So at some point we always thought like, okay, it would be really nice to have at least one other tier that's higher priced. And so we had kind of thought of this team plan. We thought it made sense. We knew that there was going to be some people who had more than one user, but at the end of the day, like, you don't want to build something purely based on assumption and then no one uses it and you wasted all that time. So we kind of waited until we had enough people tell us like, yeah, we really want this. I did a few Skype interviews with some of our power users to kind of figure out whether that's something that we needed. And so yeah, like, it was a combination of us definitely wanting another tier of pricing where we can make more money, and also people telling us that that's what they wanted.
I like it. So you still do Skype interviews. You've mentioned this numerous times now, getting on a call with customers and figuring it out, like what it is either you solve or have solved or can solve for them.
Yeah, there's a really good book I read called Lean Customer Development by Cindy Alvarez, I believe. And it's just a really good way of identifying whether, basically to confirm your hypothesis in terms of like either a product that you're building or a feature that you're building. And it's a really good framework, because going back to the first business we started, which was Classmate Catch, like, I think Mark spent like 4 months building the initial thing. And had we had done like customer development at that time, I'm not sure we would have really built it. So, now that we've been doing the software thing for a little while, it's just so easy to build stuff that you think people want, but they actually don't. And when, we're a small bootstrapper team, like, we only have two full-time people working on the product. So the last thing you want to do is like spend a whole bunch of time building something that no one's actually going to use.
Yeah, exactly. And I know people are listening and being like, it's not easy to build out a software product. But when you have a co-founder and a team around you and some success, then it does get easier. But you really have to make sure that you're pointing your team always in the right direction.
Yeah, totally.
Beforehand.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Christopher, this has been a lot of fun. I want to wrap up on one final question for you if I can.
Sure.
And it's actually a question that you alluded to at the very, very beginning, which is that sort of end goal. But it's this idea I'm working with calling the entrepreneurial gap. It seems to be this gap that we live in, and maybe you've become aware of this, where no matter what we accomplish personally, we're always projecting our successes into the future, right? That end game. But in 3 months, when you hit that new recurring revenue, in 6 months, when you, whatever metric it is you want to hit, right before you hit it, both you and I know you're going to set 5 or 10 bigger ones into the future, which we need to do, but it puts us in this gap. Like walking towards the horizon, the further you walk, the further away it always gets. I would like it right now, Christopher, if you could stop and turn around and look behind you, sort of coming through school, through getting that career, and then now going into entrepreneurship, having one successful exit from a company and now running a company that's growing really well. Can you tell me sort of how you feel about the whole journey up until today?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. One of the things that I was experiencing with my day job was this, like, I wasn't growing. And, I think that's one of the reasons why people get bored when you're kind of just doing the same thing every day. You're not really growing. And, when people asked how work was, the answer was always good. And, when Sunday night rolled around, like, I was just never pumped to get up for Monday. So, just to kind of tackle the question, one of the things that I just love about entrepreneurship is every day is so different from the next. And just thinking about how much I've grown as both a person and an entrepreneur in the last 3 years has just been incredible. And so, Sunday night, I'm just pumped to wake up on Monday. So for me, the whole journey of entrepreneurship, the biggest benefit that I've seen is just the growth in me as both a person and an entrepreneur, just being able to, work on new and exciting things and just being excited about it. So, no matter how much quote unquote success comes along the way, as long as I'm always challenged and, working on new things and having great conversations with my team, I think I'll be happy doing that.
Excellent. It's a good, humble Canadian answer. Come on, man. You're kicking ass. Just say it. Just say, yes, it's been good and I'm happy with it so far, but I want to go other places still.
That's great.
All right, Christopher, we've got to talk about Snappa sort of in passing, but now can we tell the listeners specifically about Snappa and where to find it?
Yeah. So basically, if you want to create online graphics as quickly as easily as possible, I definitely recommend you checking out Snappa. Like we mentioned, we have a free plan, and our pro plan is only $10 a month. So it's funny you mentioned where can they find it, because up until now we've been snappa.io, but today we're actually just in the process of migrating to snappa.com, which we're super excited about. So by the time this airs, our domain should be snappa.com.
Very cool. Snappa.com. I'm going to change this.
Yeah, it was a lot more than we wanted to pay, but those domain squatters aren't the friendliest of people.
Exactly. All right, snappa.com is the website you can check out. Stocksnap.io is still the website for the stock photos. Lean Customer Development, the book. I'm going to find a link to that for you, as well as we talked about Trello for tasks management, which I use 100 times a day. And then also Christopher is on Twitter at @Gimmer. I'll also link to that in the show notes. So when you're done walking, working, jogging, whatever it is you're doing right now, those will be there for you on hacktheentrepreneur.com. Christopher, once again, man, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks so much for sharing so openly. And please just keep doing what you're doing, man.
Oh, this is great. Really, really appreciate being on here. I've been a big fan of the show.
Today's episode of Hack the Entrepreneur is brought to you by StudioPress Sites, a proven solution that gives you the ease of an all-in-one website builder with the flexible power of WordPress. It's perfect for bloggers, podcasters, and affiliate marketers, as well as those selling physical products, digital downloads, and membership programs. Check out all the innovative features today at studiopress.com/hack. And as a Hack the Entrepreneur listener, you're going to get your very first month absolutely free. Go right now and check it out at studiopress.com/hack. All right, so that was a lot of fun, and it's it's funny because I do my research like any good interviewer should do. I do my research. I go into the background and of where the entrepreneurs come from. And then we try and assess where they're at and where they're going during the conversation. But it's good to know what they've built, what they've created, where they've worked so that we kind of get a baseline. There were some things that I had no idea about Christopher, such as StockSnap and this site that gets a ton of traffic and then could kind of offshoot into Snappa. It's cool. It's nowhere in any of my research, but it was cool to get to have that conversation and get to do it. I always enjoy that part of the show. But now we're at the part of the show where I get to go back and listen the way you get to listen as the third person. So I went back and I listened to the conversation. And then I went back and I listened to the conversation again. And then I went back and I listened to the conversation again. That third time back through the conversation with Christopher, there was something that I had missed. I don't know how I missed it, but I had missed it. And then this time it was there. It was right there. And it was so clear to me. It was that one thing that Christopher said. Did you get it? Did you hear it? Let's do it. Let's find the hack.
That's basically what happened. We just kept building momentum. We kept building on top of the other thing. And I think that's an important lesson too. It's a lot easier to build off of what you already have as opposed to completely starting something brand new from scratch.
And that's the hack. Christopher. I love this. It's a lot easier to build off of something you already have and to continue that momentum rather than to build something completely from scratch. We talked about this a couple months ago. I had Justin Jackson on, another Canadian entrepreneur, actually, like Christopher and myself. And he talked about the idea of sort of like one podcast, one audience, or one topic, meaning that you need to stick to one of those. So stick to the topic or stick to the audience, thematically sort of stick to what it is you're doing, because then you can build off the momentum that you had. So building themes for the bootstrap framework, which is what Christopher and his partner did at first, and then they sold that business. They realized that creating the content, it was hard to create images, right? And then that could evolve into Snappa. Snappa.com now, and StockSnap before that. These are all evolutionary momentum building things. It's not just from a dead stop, try and build something like Snappa that hits $25,000 monthly recurring revenue. That's not how it works. It's an evolutionary process of building one thing on top of the other, whether that's this audience that you want to build and then sell things to, or launch a tiny little product or a tiny piece of software. If you want to get into software, start with Gmail extension, depending on whatever market is you're in, a Gmail extension or a Chrome extension. Don't build something massive. Just build something small, get some successes, get some failures, learn some stuff, and get people who are using it and liking it, and slowly build off of that. Just keep building that momentum. It's always easier than starting something brand new from scratch. Christopher, thank you so very much. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Christopher's been up to some cool stuff, and it's great to get to talk to him, get some insight into how he's thinking, especially because it's fairly recently that he's made that transition from being in an office with a career that he's supposed to want and supposed to keep and supposed to be sort of sought after career, but it wasn't for him, and it's not for most of us here. And so it's interesting to get to hear his perspective, and now also to get to kind of enjoy with him some of his successes along the way. HackTheEntrepreneur.com. It's the website. Head over there, get onto the email list. I'll have Christopher's episode up over there for you. A link to Snappa, the new Snappa.com, no longer Snappa.io, StockSnap, the Lean Customer Development book, Trello we talked about, and also Christopher on Twitter. I'll track down as well. So it is all there for you. Also, check out the blog. We're writing still once a week, every Monday. And I think there's some stuff on there that's going to really help you and that you just might dig. All right. It's been fun. Thank you so much for stopping by. I truly 100% do appreciate it. And please, until next time, Keep hacking the entrepreneur.